Inside your spotlight this morning, we're addressing a critical responsibility that many professionals may not fully understand with respect to their role in protecting children from abuse. And that is mandatory reporting under this country's child protection legislation. Our guest from the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago will help clarify who is legally required to report suspected child abuse or neglect. This morning, we are joined by attorneys Crystal and Harper and Mandisa Ifill from the Legal Services and General Counsel Department at the Authority. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show. How are we doing this morning?
Wonderful.
We're doing good. I'm good.
Great. Shall we start with you, Mandisa? Who's legally required to report suspected child abuse in Trinidad and Tobago?
Basically, anyone who has care for a child. So if a child is in your care, you're the parent, you're the guardian, you have a responsibility. If you are temporarily have a child in your care as well, you also have the responsibility to...
Even if you're just babysitting?
Yes.
You still have that responsibility?
So basically, anyone who's a person of trust as well. So that would be a doctor, a medical practitioner, a psychologist, a sociologist, anyone who has the responsibility to take care of a child while that child is in your care. Means a teacher as well, you have that responsibility.
It kind of sounds like almost any adult.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, because at any point in time, you could be taking care of a child, you could be dropping a child home, a taxi driver, or whatever the case might be. You have a responsibility at some point in time,
Yes.
so you have that legal responsibility.
Absolutely.
Which part of the legislation is this found in Crystal?
So definitely under the Sexual Offences Act, it is actually stated that those persons, as Mandisa would have said, positions of trust, would need to report. But at the authority, we normally do and we practice what's in the best interest of children. So as indicated, anyone who works closely with children in any capacity, once you see any sign of abuse, you are under duty to report.
And they report it to who? The police, the Children's Authority? Who are they required to report it to?
Both police. Of course, you call 999, especially if it's an emergency. And then, of course, you can call us. We have a 24-hour hotline, and that's 996.
996. So
Yes.
you can either call 999 or 996 and report.
So what I will also add is that the police, they do matters of a criminal nature, while the Children's Authority, we do psychosocial.
Yes.
Okay. All right, but you still could call both.
Yes.
Regardless
Yes.
of what, and you all also have a great partnership from what I understand.
Yes, we
Yes.
communicate with each other.
All right, what types of abuse or harm can trigger the mandatory reporting obligation?
So essentially, it will be sexual abuse,
Okay.
usually would trigger the mandatory reporting.
Not
as we
physical
indicated,
abuse.
so that's what we're saying. So we're always on the best interest of children. So
Right.
of course, any form of abuse, so therefore it will be physical, emotional, and sexual abuse for one. Children who may be victims, unfortunately, of neglect. We also have children who may be exposed to significant harm. Those children as well, any form of abuse, whether it be exploitation, and anything. Sometimes children can be living in dangerous situations or conditions that may expose them to danger. So any form of danger across the board.
Crystal,
Yes.
and that leads me to so many questions because
Yes.
you talk about, exploitation.
Yes.
We oftentimes see children on the highway being forced to sell goods. Is that legal?
So of course not, it's not. And in a case like that, if you were to see something of this sort, like everything, it's a case-by-case basis, right? So as you see it, you're under duty to report. So once you report, it will be investigated. And upon the investigation, then we will learn how far we
Here's
go.
my challenge with that, right, Crystal?
Yes.
Is I have been at traffic lights and I've seen police vehicles stop at the same traffic light I stopped at, witnessing a mother and child asking for money, as the case may be, witnessing a mother sitting on the side of the road and a child up and down in the traffic trying to beg for money, and the police do nothing. So who do I feel obligated to report that to? If the police there, seeing it, knowing it's illegal, we all know it's illegal, and they don't do nothing, why would I bother to call?
I think we have to be children's gatekeepers, right? So at the end of the day, once you bring it to our attention, we certainly will investigate. So that's why we say, as Mandy sort of indicated earlier, everyone has a responsibility and a duty to report. So only when you report, then we can know.
Then you can start the investigation.
Of course.
Mandy, so what is the time frame to report? If I see something or I know of something happening, whether it be in my neighborhood or in the public or whatever the case, is there a time frame that I have to report it by?
I would say that you report as soon as possible. So once you become aware of the information or the event that is occurring, you report as soon as possible. What I usually say is, okay, if you have a child in your care, you care for this child, you send that child by someone, you don't know that something is happening to that child, would you want somebody to report it to you? Or how
Immediately.
soon would you want somebody to report it to you?
Immediately.
Right, so
Let me
with that
deal with
in
it.
mind, that is how we should report incidents that occur.
And when you're making the report, do you need to have evidence, proof, all that stuff lined up, or can you just call and say, well, I suspect or I feel or I know that this is happening?
Well, ideally, if you have evidence or any information that is relevant, that would be ideal. But what we start at is basic suspicion. All we need is for you to have suspicion of something that is occurring, and we would investigate.
You mentioned earlier, Christina, emotional abuse is one of the forms of abuse. Can you give us some examples of that so people are more aware of? Because people might say, you know, if I give my child licks, they might ball on the place, and they might say it's emotional abuse. But does it fall in that category?
So there is always the idea when you talk about emotional abuse, it's everything in the sense of everything is subjective, right? So at the end of the day is what could be traumatic to a child at the end of the day. So I'm saying that to say if something is on a continuous basis. So it's almost like if you're dropping like something dropping like a water and it's there.
The single water
eventually it's going to exacerbate and get bigger, right? So I'm saying over time, if we see that is happening, then certainly. Remember, children, you know, they're innocent, right, at the end of the day. So we are truly their gatekeepers. So I think, yes, while, you know, one shouting may not, but over a period of time, that can certainly do damage to a child.
Okay. Are there any consequences, Mandisa, for somebody who is supposed to be an adult mandatory reporting if they don't report a case of suspected abuse?
Yes, there are consequences for not reporting or mandatorily reporting a case of abuse. So yeah, would be $15,000 on summary conviction. You
for not saying nothing?
Of course, yes.
Okay.
And 7 years imprisonment.
Yes,
and there's a little caveat.
Yes.
There's a little caveat, right? Of course, without any reasonable excuse. We don't have a reason excuse as to why you did not report once you have the mandatory duty to report.
Okay, so even if you say, well, I think, but I ain't sure, you should still report just in case.
Out of an abundance of caution, yes.
All right, and if someone makes a report in good faith about suspected abuse and the allegations are not substantiated, is that person protected from civil or criminal liability?
Once it's made in good faith, absolutely, they would be protected. But of course, if it's just a nuisance and you're being a bother.
Well, how do you know the difference?
So when you investigate, at the end of the day, you will know, right? So once you investigate and there's some validity there, it will the evidence will pan out. Of course, if it's not, then certainly, yes.
And the reports, I have to identify myself when I'm making the report, or can I make a report anonymously?
You can make a report anonymously. If you choose to identify yourself, then so be it. But you don't have to, because, you know, in Trinidad...
It's the island.
Yes, most people like to say, I don't want to be a snitch. Or because of the close relations, it's family, it's friends, they don't want to have their name called. So you have that avenue where you can make a report and feel safe that you would not be identified.
Okay, and when we talk in mandatory reports, does it override confidentiality? Because you mentioned earlier doctors and people like that who are supposed to, like psychotherapists or physiotherapists or whatever the case may be, and they also have that responsibility of confidentiality. Where is that line? Where do we set that line?
Yes, it does override in this case. So if a doctor...
Confidentiality, nothing.
Yes.
And abuse come in the picture.
Yes, because we're weighing this with the best interest of a child. So if a nurse or a doctor or police officer does an examination on a child and they realize that there is some sort of abuse taking place, the child needs to be protected. So it overrides the confidentiality in this case, and it needs to be reported.
Is there anything in the whole system, I guess, that protects the person who's being reported from any repercussions that may happen? So, I mean, yes, there's the aspect of anonymous. So if I don't go anonymous and I say, well, yes, it's me reporting about Ayenka and she doing this to the child or whatever the case might be, is there anything in place to protect me as the person reporting from whatever repercussions that may come?
That's such an open question, as in, of course, if it's physical harm, there's always the police, right? If somebody were to physically harm you. But we would hope that the idea is, again, we are children's gatekeepers, right? So if it is, it's in the... So once, even if it's investigated, it's not to necessarily... where they're perpetrators, certainly they need to be, you know, brought to justice. But at the end of the day, especially if it's in families, like in a case of neglect, so it might be just a parent who needs a little bit of interventions. So the idea, the core of it is that once you bring it to our attention, is to help the children, and where there are families, is to kind of make them back whole again as best as possible. Okay.
Have you seen that happen, though, where cases of abuse have been reported and dealt with from the Children's Authority perspective, and then the family is made whole again and we've solved the situation?
That is usually our end goal. It's usually the fact for reintegration at the end of the day. So sometimes it's to remove a child on a temporary basis, work with the family. Children don't live in silos. So it's to work with them and then hopefully reintegrate gradually and then eventually be full reintegration. Sometimes there's monitoring after, just to make sure all is well and that they're back on, so they might have fallen off the path and then just to get them back on.
Yeah.
So yes.
You mentioned earlier the police deal with the criminal aspect of things, but if I report something to the Children's Authority and it is not deemed criminal, do you have to report it to the police as well?
If it's not deemed criminal, no, we don't have to.
Okay. But what is the process that happens after I report something to the Children's Authority then?
Once something is reported, we would do our investigation. So we would get the necessary information. We would go out to the family member. We would go out to the community. And basically, if it's a matter before the court, we would do a report and submit it to the court.
Approximately how long is that process?
Well, it depends. So it's a case by case.
Right.
So it could be a week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, a month. So it's based on the availability of the individuals.
I like those numbers. Those are fairly small numbers because I've heard some scary stories about people having to wait 6 months to sometimes years in some cases to get any sort of justice or closure in certain situations. Ladies, this is all the time we have for this morning, but I thank you very much for joining us. Before we leave, any closing words that you want to leave with Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to mandatory reporting?
As we always say at the authority, I guess, what do we always say, Mandisa?
I think it's going to give me the police reporting. If you see something, say something.
Well, it's almost along those lines, correct, that children is our, they're our future, and anything you see, it's our duty to report and to protect them. So, yes.
Mandisa, any closing words from you?
I will say the same as Crystal, that we have a responsibility or a duty to children of our nation, and should we see anything, we should say something.
Most definitely. Ladies, thank you very much for joining us this morning and sharing the information. I know that Trinidad and Tobago would definitely appreciate it. And if you see something, please say something. You can report to the Children's Authority at 996, or you can report to the police at 999. Mandatory reporting. Every adult has a responsibility. If you see something going wrong, please say something. Crystal Ann, Harper, and Mandisa Ifill, attorneys at law, representing the Children's Authority this morning, joining us on the Now Morning Show. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more. Stay tuned.
This song is direction in this blessed land of ours.